So after the prayer one day, at the masjid, somebody said, you know what, Imam, you should do a little, 10-minute talk on like fiqh or something like that, like every day or a couple days a week or something like that. And I told him, I told him fiqh takes time. And he's like, what do you mean? It's like, isn't it easy? Isn't it just like do this and don't do that? And this is right and this is wrong. I told him that it's not really that easy. Yes, there's many, many things that the scholars agreed about or that the schools agreed about, but there's many, many things that they differed about. And even if they didn't always differ about what was best, right? Maybe a lot of times you find them in agreement about what was best, and they differed in, what was acceptable on the lower end of things. Like, what if this happens? What if that happens? Is it okay or is it not okay? And it's not an issue of one's right and one's wrong. The vast majority of the time, they're using Quran as proof. They're using Hadith as proof. They're using Arabic language as proof. And so I gave him an example, and this is the example I always give when you talk about wudu, right? And how much of your head should you wipe in wudu, okay? The madhabs have different opinions. Some say you have to wipe the entire head. Some say you have to wipe 2/3 of the head at least. Others, 1/3 at least. And another madhab says even just the smallest amount of your head counts. What's their evidence? They all use the Quran and Hadith and the Arabic language as evidence. And they all disagree on the interpretation of one single letter, the letter ba in the ayah in Surah Al-Ma'idah in the Quran. Does ba mean all the head, some of the head, most of the head, the smallest amount of the head? So if you want me to do a fiqh lesson in only 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it takes time, because I don't want to, for example, you don't want to just give, it's a balance to strike, because you have to give the layperson enough to go off of, but you also have to make the layperson understand that that's not the only way. You don't want the layperson to take that one thing that they know and then go out and then scan the world and say, well, you're not doing that thing that I was taught, so that has to be wrong, right? So these sorts of things, they take explanation and take time. And honestly, one of the major fronts, I think, when it comes to educating Muslims in our global village now that we have, the world's becoming smaller. You've got people of different madhabs and schools of thought sort of in much more free and open communication than centuries or even decades before, let alone within one particular masjid or area. There needs to be, I think, education on the bounds of acceptability, right? Because just because there is a difference of opinion doesn't mean it's a valid one, right? There are valid and invalid differences of opinion, but people don't know what that is, right? And so people need to be educated as to where are the boundaries, right? If you're inside this circle, you see this going on, you should expect to see that going on, and it's okay. A lot of people, they get hung up on the madhabs without realizing that the madhabs, the legal schools, they almost always go back to the companions, or they go back to the companions in the majority of things, right? So some people have this imagination that they're going to go back to, the Quran and the Sunnah upon the understanding of the companions. Well, okay, the understanding of the companions is in the madhabs themselves. And so these things take time, they take education, and everybody should be very, very humble in what they know and don't know. And if you're learning something and if you're taught one way, then you should usually suspend judgment. I think that's a healthy sort of way for the layman to go about it. Take one way, whether it's the way of your local masjid or if it's the way of a particular school of legal school that you're aware of, and just suspend judgment on other things that you see until you're able to ask other people of knowledge about those things. Don't automatically assume that they're completely incorrect and wrong. And I'll tell you an example of this. Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, okay, his madhab in his legal school or his understanding, we don't say the Bismillah when we recite Surah Al-Fatiha. When we stand up for prayer, we start Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Okay, but in the madhab of Imam Shafi, who is his teacher, you say the Bismillah. You say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen when you're reciting out loud in the Salah. And so Imam Ahmad is reported to, when he was traveling in lands that were dominantly upon a Shafi'i's way of understanding, then he would do what they do. He would recite the Basmalah out loud. Even though that wasn't his opinion, he understood that this was the way that the people were taught. This is what they understand. They don't understand all the differences in fiqh, and so this is something that we can accommodate.